Hi guys, and massive welcome into another episode of Focus and Fierce TV, where the purpose of this channel is to help inspire hardworking women to live a life with more health, more happiness, more adventure and more awesomeness. So today I've got with me a very special guest, the lovely Jill Gardner. Now Jill is a former personal trainer and fitness instructor, and she was a pioneer of the online fat loss program and the founder of Hate It, Change It. Jill was fondly known as the Fat Controller. I always loved that name. It was such an awesome name. And has been in the fitness industry for over 10 years, but had her career cut short by a mystery illness. Now, Jill is 43 years old and has relentlessly battled for 8 years with declining health, told countless times by doctors that there was nothing wrong. And then Jill eventually had to quit her dream business of teaching and coaching. And she knew something was seriously wrong and finally sought the help of a private specialist who found the root cause of her health issues and was past exposure to the bacteria. Now, I'm going to try and pronounce this. Borrelia, or go on, tell me how it's pronounced.
Bodifori, some people say Bodifori, it doesn't matter.
Bodifori, or otherwise known as Lyme's disease. And as she begins a treatment and a slow path to recovery, Jill is using the lessons learned during the darkest moments of her life so far to develop strength, grit and resilience. And every challenge we face has a lesson attached. Changing perspective from suffering to growth has been the biggest factor in recovery. In fact, Jill believes that her chronic illness has helped her to uncover her chronic brilliance. And I love that, because it's one of the reasons that I really wanted to speak to you, because I think you are such an inspirational person, and to see the struggles and challenges that you're coming up against, but also on a personal level. Like, I did a charity event for Yvonne Foray, which was a lady from my local town. That's must be like 8 years ago now, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of Lyme's disease. I had absolutely no idea what it was or where it came from or anything, but now I think you're like the fourth person I know now that has Lyme's disease. In fact, the lady that helped me on my last retreat has got Lyme's disease, so it's coming up more and more, and I'm hearing more about it. So I really wanted to get your message out and sort of your experience really of what this disease has done to you. So can you give us a little bit of a background about you and what happened?
Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of people that can relate to this. It affects people differently. Lyme will affect people differently, and some people will fall ill acutely, straight away. And some people like myself will have sort of declining health issues, and so therefore it's quite difficult to know what's going on, especially when there's a lot of ignorance out there in the medical world, especially in the UK. So it was a difficult time, because essentially I was at the peak of my fitness career. So to get into perspective, I was teaching 30 to 40 hours of fitness a week, building a fitness business. So I was having the time of my life. But these just strange things were happening. And but you know when your gut feeling says to you, this isn't right. But of course, nothing was being found. And so, of course, you kind of carry on, you soldier on. And that's what I did. And for about 7 or 8 years, because like you, I didn't know anything. I'd never heard of Lyme disease before. And so it didn't even cross my radar. It wasn't on my radar at all. I trusted the doctors, trusted the tests that were coming back with, bloods are normal, you're normal, you look fine. And of course,
I think this is just such a huge thing, because the people that I've spoken to, apart from one person who got diagnosed quite quickly actually, and she was being able to give antibiotics, because I believe that makes the difference. If you can get the antibiotics in an early stages, then that makes a significant difference. But for a lot of people, it is this almost like the doctor's like, you saying there's nothing wrong with you, you're making this up, kind of. You get put, there's that stigma on it.
Yeah. And that probably was harder to deal with than the illness itself, because you feel like you're going mad. You absolutely feel like you're going mad, and you can't believe that there's nothing coming up. You literally go, what do you mean there's nothing wrong with me? You're almost begging for help, because I remember, you know, there were times when I couldn't get out of bed, and if I did, I was passing out. I broke my nose one time, I blacked out, and I'm thinking to myself, this is not normal. But of course then you think, well, maybe I'm teaching too many classes. I was going through a divorce. My father was had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So there's a lot of stress going on at the time. And I'm certain, and I'm absolutely certain that in most cases, a lot of cases that don't get acute Lyme in the first instance will go on to develop it because of an emotional trauma or a physical trauma or collection of things that happen. And in my case, that is what happened. It was about 8 years ago that it all started, and that was literally at the time when so much was going on for me personally and emotionally and physically, that you know, that if there was a time I was going to fall ill, it was then. But of course it went on and on and on, and over time it just got worse, and I kept battling it, I kept fighting it, I kept sort of carrying on, and it was getting harder and harder and harder. And I think, as you mentioned before, it got to the point where I couldn't teach anymore, and that was like, you know, there's really something not right here.
What are the like specific symptoms? I mean, is it like tiredness? Like, I mean, you've said that you know you've passed out. Are you in physical pain with your body? What were the symptoms showing up for you?
For me personally, I had my first episode of illness, as I call it, was about 8 years ago, and out of the blue, I just was hit with this awful kind of virus or flu. I don't know what it was, but I kind of just, you know, thought, well, I'll, you know, lie on the couch for a few weeks. I have the holidays off with the kids. I won't do much, which is really difficult for me. I wasn't somebody that could sit and do nothing, but I had no choice, and so I did. And then I'd go back into teaching, but I was never the same. I kind of had the same thing happen every 5-6 months. I'd have this same episode of sort of flu symptoms, fatigue, brain fog. You know, I was starting to question my IQ. I was saying, oh my gosh, I can't retain information. I couldn't read. I was reading a book a week, and all of a sudden, I couldn't read a paragraph of a book. So these types of things were happening, and I was getting joint pain. I was getting light sensitivity, really random sort of symptoms that would come and go. And then I started having really bad dizzy spells, which culminated into me passing out. I would have episodes of blacking out. So it was really, really weird and random, and there was no pattern. You know, it was kind of like, well, I keep a diary. Maybe it's something I'm eating. Maybe it's, you know, sleep. Maybe, you know, and I'm kind of thinking, is it, you know, hormonal? Getting desperate. But there was no pattern. There was absolutely no pattern to it. And gradually the episodes got closer together. Then the symptoms got worse, and it you know, and I have episodes when I was literally bedridden, and the depression would set in. I mean, it was awful depression. I remember just thinking, oh, God, what's the point? You know, but I had kids, thankfully, because that kind of drove me to carry on. But yeah, that's, for me, that's how it happened. And it just gradually got worse. It was a real slow decline.
So what was the process of eventually getting diagnosed? How did you figure out what it was?
Gosh. So if you can imagine, for 7 or 8 years, I was backwards and forwards to the GP. The standard blood tests were coming back with nothing, but because I was getting a lot of neurological symptoms by this stage, I was getting like neuropathy, I was getting numbness in my fingers and toes, my feet, stabbing pains. Eventually I begged, and they sent me to a neurologist, and I went to 2 neurologists. The first one, oh, it's migraines. This is all caused by migraines. So you go away and think, well, okay, humour them, let's go with that. And of course, nothing was happening, the drugs were doing nothing. Then I went back eventually, probably, there's a gaps here of about a year or 2 years, because I just carried on, I just kind of did what I could, I sort of soldiered on, as it were. And then the last time I went to see a neurologist, I begged my GP, I literally was sobbing, saying, you know, I can't work anymore, I don't understand what's going on, I'm getting worse, you know, am I going to lose the sensation in my feet, am I going to be able to walk, you know, that type of thing. And eventually she said, look, you've got to stop coming in, your tests are normal, this is ridiculous, you know, you've got to stop this, you've got to just go home and accept it. And she said, I'll do one last letter to the neurologist, and then you've got to stop coming in. And I remember walking away thinking, God, this is just torture. This is like a nightmare. And so I went to see the neurologist. And in the meantime, I got a letter from my GP and basically said, you're out of area, bearing in mind I'd moved a couple of years before. You need to find a different surgery. And I remember thinking to myself at that point in time, I'm being kicked out. My GP is getting rid of me. That's it. My GP doesn't want to see me anymore. And also I'm getting emotional here, because it was that point where I thought, I'm on my own. There's nothing the NHS are going to give me. There's nothing more I can do. I've begged. I've literally gone in and sobbed my heart out, and they've told me there's nothing more they can do. And I went to see this neurologist sometime after, because obviously it takes time, doesn't it? You can imagine it takes time. And he examined me, and of course, you know, he just sort of, well, you're slim, you look fine, but I think your neurology, your twitching and everything else, and your neuropathy is down to probably tight genes. He said, you've probably seen it in the Daily Mail. There was an article recently, it's down to tight genes. And I didn't even question him. I'd taken at that time, I'd had some test results back from a German lab. This is just February of this year, to say that I'd had Lyme disease, that I had Lyme disease, and a very suppressed immune system as a result of the chronic Lyme. And I showed him the test results, and he didn't even look. He just said, our NHS test is perfectly fine, and dismissed me. And it was literally that point where you realise, you're wasting your time going to the NHS or your GP or whatever, and that was it. I thought, you know what, you've got to become your own doctor, your own specialist, and that's where I sought help from communities that are of people like myself, of which there are thousands. It was like it was like going down this rabbit warren of realization that there's this whole underground world of people like me who've been through what I'm going through, and it was just horrific.
I mean, the thing is, for us, we just believe that the NHS is going to take care of us no matter what. And you know, that you are not the first person that I've spoken to that has had this experience. So it's really to kind of empower people to sort of, like you did, go and seek, you know, what did you do then? You know, had you even come across Lyme disease at this point and thought, right, I need to get tested for this? Or was it just what was the process with that? Was it finding a specialist?
It was about a year or so before, a friend of mine actually, who ended up getting diagnosed with chronic Lyme, said to me, you know, it sounds a little bit like Lyme, you know, you sound like you've got Lyme, you know, this could be Lyme. And I did a little bit of research on Google. Of course, I found all the sort of the standard posts from the NHS, you know, nice guidelines, this, that and the other. And of course, it was kind of intimating that, you know, you'd have a bullseye rash, and you'd have all the classic signs of Lyme disease, and that there's no such thing as chronic Lyme, you know, you get post-Lyme, whatever. So I questioned it for some time, and I did my research. You know, I went away and did my research. I even got an NHS Lyme disease test, which I was told very likely to come back negative. But of course I thought, well, they've agreed to give me the test, and of course it came back negative. So I had all this going on for about a year or 18 months before I thought, well, you know, I'm going to have to research. But researching to get tested for Lyme is really, really complicated. It's not a, you know, go to a lab somewhere, private lab specialist in London or something, let's say on Harley Street or whatever, and just say, give me a Lyme disease test, because it's not that straightforward. There's not just one bacteria involved. There's many different co-infections that you get, plus viruses. So, and because of the way it suppresses your immune system, you're not just dealing with Lyme, you're now dealing with lots of other things that are going on. So getting my head around that took some time. And then there was the investment that I had to make because obviously I had to pay for it. And, you know, all the labs that you could go to America, you could go to Germany. So there was a lot to consider. And I went to various specialists. There was a clinic in Hemel Hempstead called Breakspear. They wanted thousands of pounds. And I went to 2 different practitioners who clinically diagnosed me first, and they said, yes, we think you've got chronic Lyme, but we can get a lab result to back that up. And so it was a big decision. It was a big decision. And by then I became quite aware that even if I got diagnosed and I understood what was wrong with me, there was no solution. There was no quick solution or quick fix. So there was that dilemma going on in my head. It was like, God, do I really want to know? But of course I did.
Sort of my next question around, yes, now you've got the diagnosis. Now, what were the next steps? Is there medication? I mean, I know from what I've read about, you know, lifestyle, of course, is such huge implications. But for you, who's someone who is fit and healthy anyway, what changes did you then have to make?
Oh gosh, yeah. So everybody's so very different. You can't treat every Lyme patient the same. Every Lyme patient will react differently to different protocols. And that was a big eye-opener for me, because I literally, when I first got diagnosed, I just thought, right, well, let's find out what everyone's doing. There must be a protocol. There must be a standard procedure to follow. And of course there isn't. So for me, the first thing I was looking at was obviously my diet. Was my diet good enough? Was I doing the right thing? So luckily for me, my background in the fitness industry meant that it wasn't a big deal. I was already kind of doing a large amount of that, which is gluten-free, sugar-free, dairy-free. So removing all the kind of classic irritants, anything that might cause allergic reactions, anything that might suppress the immune system or cause inflammation. So I kind of was doing that largely anyway. Lifestyle things, well, stress. I mean, how can you eliminate all stress from your life? It's impossible. I'm a single parent and I had a business that was running. I was self-employed. So getting my head around the stress aspect was really difficult because I was living and breathing it every day. And then the stress of finding out you've got a chronic disease. So I learned a lot of meditation, I learned a lot about, so I went on a training course about consciousness, and that for me was a turning point because I was able to kind of separate myself from the illness. So I wasn't the disease, it was happening to me. And that was really important for me. So kind of, have that ability to disassociate from it, if you like, to be able to know that it wasn't my fault, because there was a lot of blame. I had a lot of blame and guilt and shame almost as well, that how could I be so fit and healthy and get so sick? How could I have a business that promoted health and wellness and be so sick? It just was, and I had this period of grieving. So I had to give myself that space to grieve because I was grieving my old life, my old business, obviously fear of the future. So I had all that going on. So I had to manage that somehow in my head. So that was really, really important for me.
Yeah, so again, I mean, I talk about mindset a lot. So it's simply looking at, like you say, disassociate yourself from this is happening to me. You can only have power over how you move forward. So you kind of took control of that.
That's right. And there was no blame. In the end, I had to recognise there wasn't any blame. It's just one of those things. And all I could do was move forwards. And instead of kind of looking at it as, in my darkest moments, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And, I don't want this life. And it was, all of that kind of language, really negative language that was just not helping. And so once I started to see almost the benefit of being unwell, so in other words, it was an amazing opportunity to reflect. I had a lot of time to challenge myself to do things I would, I couldn't imagine that I'd be able to do, like to manage finances, to research treatment options, to challenge specialists, and that type of thing. It was, it's been sort of a really enriching experience, and the people I've met. I mean, there are people that are, really. I felt like I was, really ill, and I couldn't imagine living like this. But there are people that are far, far worse than I've been, and so it's kind of perspective. When on my darkest days, I'm like, well, I've managed to walk today. I've got outside and I've managed to walk, and there are people that are bedridden 24/7 with this. So it's kind of like, well, where do you measure? I stopped measuring myself against what I used to be able to do. 30 to 40 hours of exercise a week. Oh my God, now look at me. But actually, look at where I was and how I've come from, where I've come from, and actually what's really important to me. Because previously I was so driven by success and earning good money and all those things that drive a lot of people with running businesses, that I stopped and asked myself, actually, was that really what I wanted? And of course, it wasn't what I really wanted. I didn't really want that at all, but I thought I did. So it's enabled me to get off that kind of hamster wheel, if you like, where you kind of get caught up in what you think you should be doing. But what I recognised was I was driven, but that means you're the passenger. Who's driving that? What was driving that? And it wasn't really me. So now I'm in this amazing position to reflect and ask myself, what does Jill really want out of life? What do I want? And so it's been a gift, really, in a way.
Yeah. So how has, I mean, you talked about having to give up your dream job. Are you still able to do any coaching of any type? What's happened?
So last July was my last class I taught, and even then I nearly didn't make it in that morning because I woke up, and as usual I was struggling to kind of get out of bed, and that's how it got. Every day you wake up different, and that was the last class I taught, and I recognised that I needed to put my oxygen mask on, and I had nothing to give anyone. I had nothing, and I desperately wanted to help people, and it was frustrating and it broke my heart. But I realised that until I healed and fixed myself, I had nothing to give anybody. So initially it was a relief to walk away, and then, as I mentioned, I went through quite a period of grief because I held on for so long. And I should have quit you know, months ago. In fact, years ago, when I first fell ill, I perhaps should have gone, you know what, maybe I need to give my body a break. But hindsight is a wonderful thing. But yeah, once I got my head around it, and I thought, actually, what's the right thing to do for me and my body, my health, and my kids, and my future? And that was to park my business and put my clients to one side and be selfish for a while. And yeah, that feels good to say that now. And I think that's what a lot of people need to do when they recognise they're not well, whether it be Lyme or anything else, is to recognise that, you know, you're the most important person in your life, and you've got to look after yourself.
And I think that, you know, for many people can be such a huge challenge, especially like you say, you were self-employed, you're self-reliant on your salary. So having to go to a place where, you know, what sort of support have you been able to get financially, or even from, you know, friends? How's the support network been for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly challenging, really challenging, because to a lot of people I look fine. They'll see me out and about, and when I'm out and about, of course I make an effort, of course I've got a smile on my face, that's who I am. But you know, obviously on the days I couldn't go out, well, they didn't see me, obviously. But fortunately for me, you know, I had the foresight to put savings aside. You know, as a single parent, I thought to myself, you know, I need to be careful with my spending, and thank God I was, because I was able to then rely on that when I fell ill. But that, you know, the cost of Lyme, people suffering with Lyme disease will recognise this. It is extremely expensive. We get no help. I get no support from the government. There's no handouts. There's no disability allowance. There's no sick pay. And, you know, some of us are spending up to £1,000 a month on treatment. And that's unsustainable, you know, even on the savings pot. So, yeah, you know, I've got to the point now where I'm well enough to consider going back to work. And you know, obviously considering what's the right thing for me. Will it be self-employment, or am I better off going? I don't know at this stage, but I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I'm considering being well enough and sustaining health to go back to work. So it's a huge challenge, and to not let that consume you and work with worry. It's really hard. It's really hard. And you know, as I said, there's people out there that don't have those savings, and they've lost their jobs, and they've lost their homes, and they're still sick. And they're getting sicker, and it's a desperate, desperate situation.
And you talked then about how you feel that your health has improved. I mean, like you say, you'll have days where, you know, to me, you like you say, you look completely fine, energy levels can be fine. So what do you think you've contributed, what has contributed to you feeling like you are getting improvements? Because I presume for a lot of people, it's a process of more deterioration.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I started treatment for Lyme in February, and up until that point, I was gradually still in deterioration. I was still, you know, still declining, which was incredibly scary. So I tried a couple of protocols in the first instance, which were herbal, and I discovered at the very beginning you've got to get. It's a bit like, if you can imagine building a house. And even with fat loss, you know, and fitness, you've got to build a strong foundation first. You've got to get all the fundamentals right. And when you've been chronically ill for a long time, a lot of your organs will be affected. So my thyroid, my gut wasn't working very well, my detoxification pathways, you know, all the organs that work for detoxification weren't doing their job properly. So what I found in the beginning was that I wanted to kill and get rid of the disease, get rid of it all, you know, give it antimicrobials and antibacterials and things. But I wasn't ready to do that. It made me worse. So once I realised that, I was lucky enough to find a clinic, homeopathic, naturopathic clinic that do a form of treatment that basically very slow process, but they work through all your main organs and basically get the foundations right, so that you're then able to, it brings your immune system up. You've got to bring the immune system up so that your body can help fight the bacteria, the pathogens, the parasites, the viruses, all that type of thing. So it's a really slow process, and I'm an impatient person. So initially I was like, come on, this isn't working, this isn't going fast enough. But actually, when I think back from what I was like in February to what I am like today, it's quite remarkable. So yes, I've got more energy, I've got more cognitive, function. It's not fantastic, but it's far better than it was. I can read again. But you know, there's leftover kind of issues. You know, like the neuropathy is still there. You know, I get sort of chronic fatigue type syndrome, type symptoms. You know, I couldn't go and do a fitness class, for example. I can perhaps walk half an hour to an hour now, maybe slightly more. So yeah, it's where I think I was probably in February about 30% functioning. I think I'm probably about 60%. So it's massive, yeah.
It's huge. And I think a really important thing that we touch on, or I talk about, even in fact, it's about getting to know your body. And we discussed this as you were talking about on one of your posts the other day about someone was telling you to be vegan and give up meat, and you were like, hell to the no. But the lady that I'd been working with, she was like you. She couldn't run, she couldn't do anything, and she shifted her lifestyle to a vegan lifestyle, and she is now also, like you, in fact, she's got to a point where she can now go out running again. But it is, and like you said to me, is very specific about getting to know your body, trying different things and seeing what works for you, because what works for one person is not necessarily going to work for another. So
absolutely, and that's a real take home. Yeah, definitely, because in the Lyme forum there's about 8,000 members. In fact, there's loads of different Lyme forums on Facebook that you can find, and it'd be very easy to ask someone who's getting well, what are you doing? Oh, I'll do exactly that. And you'll buy all the supplements that they use, you do the diet they use, and you follow all their protocols, but it could be the very worst thing. You might not be in the right place, you might, there's so many things to consider, and that's what makes Lyme so difficult to treat. So yeah, anyone out there that's in the same boat, I would say that it's a long journey, and you have to be prepared to be your own doctor, your own expert, and to listen to your body and take responsibility for that. No one's going to do it for you.
Yeah, I think when you can do that as well, that kind of, it's empowering, and it's kind of rebuilding your confidence levels to know that, you are the only person that can heal yourself, and you've got to kind of put in the work to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I thought before, when I was teaching all those classes, I was strong. Physical strength was brilliant, but actually what I've got out of all of this is mental resilience, mental strength, inner strength, and it's incredible. I feel much stronger in that way, than I've ever done in my whole entire life. So yeah. It's a good feeling, to be honest.
Yeah, and honestly, I watch your posts, and you post about your struggles, and then you also post about your breakthroughs, and I just think, for everything that you've gone to, you're such a great inspiration to so many people, and you're a fantastic coach. And yeah, just keep on fighting and keep on doing. And I really hope that anybody that's listening to this, if you've got any concerns, if you remotely think, I reach out to Jill. I'm going to put her links in the show notes, and she can direct you to some of the resources that she's found useful. And this really is about sharing the awareness. So please do share this, because you never know who might be affected by something like this. And can I just ask, do you know how you got infected?
I don't. I have my suspicions. As a child, we'd go camping in the New Forest, we'd go hiking, walking Wales, all over the sort of the endemic areas in the UK. But also, as a young adult, with my my ex-husband, we used to go hiking, camping, all those types of things. And I had a couple of bad episodes of flu, but of course, not everybody gets the rash, not everybody will see a tick. So I was very high risk, if you like. So I couldn't pinpoint a time, but that is actually quite common. A lot of people will have that. And if I can just say as well, that there'll be a lot of people out there that have been diagnosed with ME, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, even other things, autoimmune issues like lupus and multiple sclerosis. And if they're not getting better, if their gut feeling is that doesn't feel like the right diagnosis, to pursue sort of looking at Lyme disease, because it's one of those illnesses that will mimic other illnesses, or even trigger other illnesses. So yeah.
And what is the advice, because that is a big worry for me currently living in the mountains? My dogs are constantly got ticks on.
1 in 3 dogs carry ticks, definitely.
I'm constantly removing them, and I will find them dropped on the floor. And so for me, it's like, if you get bit by a tick, do you instantly go to the doctors? What's the recommendations that you're aware of?
So yeah, if you're unsure, if you want to, to get more information, to read through yourself, Lyme Disease UK, you've got a fantastic site, and they tell you everything. So for example, if you've got a tick attached, they teach you how to take the tick off. You don't just take it off yourself or try yourself, because you could leave the head embedded, which will then, cause issues, etc., etc. You might get a rash, but you won't necessarily get it straight away, the bullseye rash, the classic bullseye rash, but you might not get any rash. If you suspect they start developing symptoms like flu symptoms, joint pain, etc., etc., then straight away to the GP. If they dismiss you, but your gut feeling tells you different, make sure, just really pursue it, because a lot of doctors are telling patients the wrong information and they're going away. And you mentioned earlier before that if you get diagnosed quickly, you can get a course of antibiotics and you've got a good chance of full recovery. If you miss the window of antibiotic treatment or you're not giving enough antibiotics, it's important to get the right dose, then you run the risk of developing chronic Lyme later on. So it's really important that if you suspect a bite or see a bite, that you act accordingly.
And what is that window? Do we know? Is there a 48 hours? Is it a week? Don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. I wouldn't like to say, because there's people have different opinions, but there's information on the Lyme UK website, and there's a forum there as well. So if you suspect, go to the Lyme Disease UK forum, go on there. They've got all the links of what to do, and where to go, and so on and so forth.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. I know it can feel the emotion coming through, and it's probably hard to talk about, but a super important message that needs to get out for people.
Absolutely. So thank you for letting me share it. Thank you.
And thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you so much.